What is up, everybody, and welcome back to Talkin Smack with Jmack. Now, today is a very, very special day. I have my very first in-person guest. Everybody say hello to Jason Mack. This is my younger brother.
How's it going? I mean, I don't think this could have been an easier first in-person guest. Like we do live in the same house.
Well, he's moving out at the end of the week, so he's not going to be here for the foreseeable future. So, yes, it was easy, but you're also going to be my guinea pig in terms of lighting and filming, as I go forward and do more and more of these. So, what we're kind of going to talk about today is Jason's baseball career, high school on. He's dealt with a lot of really, really unique circumstances in the last 4, 5, 6 years, would you say? And so we're kind of going to dissect all of those, dissect what he's learned and what he would tell somebody who is in high school or who might be going through similar experiences. So without further ado, let's get on into it. So talk to me a little bit about Pro 5. You had an incredible high school baseball experience. It was a little bit unconventional, some might say. What was Pro 5 like for you?
It was definitely unconventional compared to your normal high school experience, but it was probably, considering that I was homeschooled, all three of us were homeschooled, that it was probably ended up being very conventional for that because it's online it's a baseball academy, but all the schoolwork, all the homework's online, and so being homeschooled, taking online classes worked really well with Pro 5, and it gave me the opportunity to play baseball, which I loved. That's all I wanted to do, to be honest with you. And so it was definitely unconventional compared to your normal high school experience, but it was definitely probably very conventional for where I was at. But no, Pro 5 was great. I went there my sophomore year, my junior year, my senior year. My freshman year was COVID. I loved it. I played with some unbelievable players, some great guys that I'm still really good friends with today. Really close with all my coaches, most of them at least. And yeah, I just got to kind of travel all over the Southeast playing baseball, and definitely helped prepare me for college and all the experiences after high school. So it was definitely a blessing to go there, and super grateful for it.
What would you say was the best experience that you had with Pro 5? What was the best memory, or maybe also the best lesson that you can, get out of your time with Pro 5?
I would say our coolest experience was, and you kind of gotten to experience this a little bit with the Home Run Derby X thing. So my senior year, they were doing a test run for the Home Run Derby X event up in Fairfax, Virginia, which is actually not too far from where we grew up in Loudoun County. And so it was a weekend event, and we literally just got to go up there. We stayed in this really nice hotel, got free meals, nice meals. Got to meet a lot of cool ex Major League Baseball players, but it was kind of different from your typical Pro 5 travel experience where you got to play, you got to perform. It was literally you're just you're getting a weekend paid to go have fun with your best friends. And so that was a blast. I would say that was my favorite experience. I would say my other one was honestly just all the memories I have with my friends there, and a lot of those guys I'm still really close to today, and super grateful for that. And then I would say my biggest lesson that I learned was definitely because going to a baseball academy, the baseball part is such the focus. Guys want to get drafted, guys want to go on to play college baseball. I would say the biggest thing I learned, and honestly the most fun I had looking back on it, was the time I had with my teammates, just goofing off, just in the dugout, in the locker room, just talking about whatever, not baseball related. But definitely that, for sure.
Definitely. It's always those moments that you don't think that you're going to remember.
It's the locker room talk.
Yeah.
It's the dugout talk.
It's those
sure.
things that you remember that you like I'm experiencing kind of the same thing on the flip side of my swimming career. I don't remember the hard practices. I don't remember the nitty gritty details of what we actually did. I remember the laughs. I remember the stupid things that we joke about and the stupid conversations.
I do remember the best game I played, and I do remember the worst game I played. No doubt about it.
Of course
I do remember going 4 for 4 one game. I do remember 0 for 3 with a hat trick. For sure. I do remember that.
Well, that's actually a really, really good segue into the next topic. Now, on the flip side, no experience is perfect. You and I both know that. What was the biggest obstacle that you kind of faced when you were at Pro 5, and how were you able to kind of overcome it?
I'd say the biggest obstacle was, I wouldn't necessarily say this is an obstacle, but I would say it's definitely a blessing. You're around so many good players every single day. You're day in and day out competing for a spot, which I do think in and of itself prepares you for the next level, because you're constantly competing with someone, you're constantly competing for a position, playing time at bats, etc. And it's it kind of prepares you to compete every single day before you get to college. And then I would say an obstacle was I kind of went into Pro 5 a little bit, not really knowing where I was at baseball wise. I was just kind of just did everything growing up, and so I kind of started as a pitcher, and then I kind of had to work my way into becoming a hitter, and ultimately becoming a hitter in college too. So that was definitely an obstacle, working through that. And then my coaches kind of wanted me to keep pitching, and then I wanted to hit, and then ultimately everybody agreed I should hit. So
You know, it's funny because I had initially been like, oh, we need to start at high school baseball. But I feel like with Jason, we probably need to go a little bit further back, because there were a lot of experiences that you had when you were really, really young that really shaped who you are as a person. He actually was not able to speak when he was really, really young. And so he ended up going to years of speech therapy, just learning how to, you know, use the muscles in his mouth and just speak. And so one of the things that he ended up doing as a young kid was throwing himself into sports, because that was the language that he spoke. You know, he wanted to compete, right? So talk to me a little bit about that experience and kind of growing up, and how that shaped your mindset today, and how, like, what you took from that experience into high school and now into your life now.
I would say, first off, every time I get to speak, it's definitely a blessing. Every time I get the opportunity to speak somewhere, or just get to speak to people or young children about my story, my faith, etc. Like, it's definitely a blessing. And that's kind of where some people's stories are, like, everybody has a unique story in their own life. Everybody has a different path that God created them to be on. But my story literally started when I was an infant, and I struggled to speak. I had really weak mouth muscles, and I'm so grateful for my parents and my siblings and my grandparents who, first off, financially had the money to invest in that, but then were emotionally willing to just pour into me for years on years on years, because it was a long journey. You got to think I was like 3 or 4, and I was still doing speech through 2nd grade. And so one of the hardest things, and I don't remember a whole lot of it, but because I was so young, but one of the things I do remember was in kindergarten and 1st grade. At that time, I was going to a private school, and my mom would literally come and pick me up every day between lunch and PE or recess, and I would miss those 2 hours of the day. And so that devastated me, because all I wanted to do was play with my friends and just goof
Compete.
off. And, yeah, compete for sure. And so I used that time to literally just go and work on pronouncing sounds. And so, yeah, but it definitely started early, and every time I get to speak, it's definitely a blessing, and I'm super grateful for it.
Definitely. Okay, I did just want to touch on that, because I feel like that's a huge core part of who Jason is. Now, let's fast forward just a little bit. Junior year of high school, you ended up committing to UNC Wilmington to go play baseball, and then you went and played a year and a half at UNC Wilmington. But let's first start with your freshman year. What was that transition like academically, just going from being homeschooled to going to in-person classes, being in school, being in a secular environment? Because I had a similar experience going from homeschool to college, and I'm curious what your experience was.
Yeah, honestly, the academics was really, really easy. Like, honestly, and like a lot of y'all like will realize this too. Like you get to freshman year, and like you have 5 classes each semester, basically 15 credit hours, and I think out of my 10 classes I took freshman year, 9 of them were a joke. Wasting my time. But no, academics was easy. It's one of those things where it's so true. It's, you show up to class, you listen, and you do your work on time, and you're just a good listener. Like, you will pass college classes. It's not as hard as everybody thinks it is. It's really not. Like, I would say the only class I probably had a hard time with, and I definitely probably the best class I've ever done, was calculus. I got an A in it. I worked my butt off, but it worked out.
Yeah, so. No, it's so funny, because both, like, our mom had both of us like fearful for our lives with college. I mean, I remember going through AP classes in high school, and I have to say,
I dropped them.
The AP classes that I took in high school were way harder than any college class that I ever took. And so I sat there, and mom was like, how are you going to stay academically eligible if you can't even pass your high school AP classes? Well,
they're not even on the same level. Like basic level high school English classes are harder than college level English classes.
Yeah, for real. And they always assume like, oh, like, you know, high school is going to be, you know, high school is just a stepping stone to college. It's not. Your college professors are some of the most chill people you're going to meet. Now, next thing I want to talk about is the baseball transition, because, you know, you kind of came in, you're an infielder, you've played virtually every position on the field, you know, historically, and you come in and they are lacking catchers, and so you kind of get shoved into this catcher role, and it's a really really unique position. So talk to me a little bit about what that transition was like and what it was like kind of becoming a catcher for a year.
Yeah, it was hard. It was really hard. My knees still like feel it. But no, catching's like, yeah, it was definitely a different experience than most people have. Like, obviously, like, you get recruited, like, you go in as an infielder, and then what kind of happened going into my freshman year was one of the catchers quit like 2 days before, and so like I think they were gonna have three catchers for that fall. Most Division I programs have 4, so like they were already down 1, and so now they're down to 2. And so I remember my coach asking me literally on the first day of practice, he was like, "Have you ever caught before?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "Well, I think we need a catcher this fall, and I think you can do it." And kind of looking at like body types, like my body, like for my class, was probably the most sustainable for it. And so I kind of just jumped into it. And then honestly, after I worked out catcher for a week, I pulled my hamstring, so I missed 2 weeks of work. And then I kind of just got thrown into scrimmages, and I caught every single scrimmage all fall. Played virtually no infield because like you're catching. Our starting catcher that fall broke his hamate bone, and so we only had 2 catchers, me and this other kid. And so it's like if you're playing in like an inter squad, you need 2 catchers, and I caught one, and our other catcher caught the other one. And so it was a lot. And then going to our spring scrimmages in the springtime before the season started, our backup catcher hurt his finger. And so it was me and the starter catching all the scrimmages. So I got a lot of catching work in a short period of time. Definitely the hardest position in baseball. It's definitely one of those things in life where I don't like to say the word trial, but that's definitely what it was. Like maybe physically it was an opportunity, but mentally it was definitely like a mental trial, just trying to get that out of my head. Like I'm going to the field to do something I'm really not that good at, but just working at it every single day. And honestly, I got to the point where at the beginning of my summer ball, jumping ahead, I caught really well for the first couple weeks of summer ball before I ended up retiring, basically.
Retired. The catching days are over. I mean, it's so funny because I remember like I would say when you started college, I had a pretty good knowledge of baseball. Like I knew, a lot about it. But it's funny listening to you just on a daily basis, just talk about like, oh, I did this today. And oh my gosh, I'm really, really having a hard time with this. And I remember, you had ended up working with one of the retired guys on your blocking or something at one point. And so it was just kind of funny for me to like listen to you describe this experience and describe how hard it is, because I really think catcher is like the most underrated position on the field by far, and it's like the most difficult by far, right?
For sure. I mean, there's just so many skills about catcher like you just don't realize, like techniques, and like blocking's not as simple as just throwing your body at the ball. Like there's like flipping the hips and just where your gloves should go, like direction, all this stuff. And then I think the coolest part about catching is definitely like the leadership part. Like you're the quarterback of the team. Like you're leading the infield, you're leading the pitcher. And it was so funny. Like I remember my first mound visit, I walked out to the pitcher. I had no idea. Like my pitching coach told me, "Here, go talk to the pitcher." I had no idea what I was gonna say. Like I walked out there and it was crickets for 15 seconds because the pitcher was like, "Go back to the home plate," because he didn't want to talk to me. And then I didn't know what to say to him, so I just stood there until the umpire came and got me, that was quite the funny moment. So.
Well, okay, let's kind of transition and talk a little bit about the rest of your freshman year in general, because freshman year, everybody knows, if you have been an athlete or not even really an athlete, freshman year is a massive transition. I mean, my freshman year was really, really rough. What is one word that you would use to describe your freshman year?
Probably, I don't want to say trial, but definitely it was an experience. I don't know if that's like the right word, but I'll probably think of one as it comes to me. But unique probably is a good word, because I had a freshman experience that most kids probably don't relate to. Like maybe like you relate to going from shortstop to third base or going from the infield to the outfield, but most kids don't really go from playing infield or outfield and then going to catcher.
Yeah.
Which is definitely different
backwards,
experience,
for
unique
sure.
to my story for sure.
Yeah, definitely. You did have some really, really cool experiences when you were at Wilmington, though. You were part of their CAA championship winning team. You got a ring from that. Maybe we should have brought that on camera. That way you could see that. And then you also got to travel with the team to their, was it their Athens regional? Talk a little bit about that experience and what that was
That's
like.
a rowdy crowd down there in Athens.
SEC baseball is no joke.
Yeah, I mean, our guy at third base, who's like one of our best players, he was our team captain. He made an error in like the third inning, and they were still chanting a phrase in the eighth inning about him. Like 5 innings, like they just would not let it go. So it was funny.
Yeah.
It was an awesome experience. It was Foley Field was sick. Just getting to take BP and then just be in Athens for that regional was really, really cool.
Definitely. Okay, now switching gears just a little bit more, let's talk about just your experience in, finding a church, finding a good Bible study group, finding that community in Wilmington, because I know that this was, it was an in and out thing. You were trying a lot of different churches. You were, you had a whole bunch of Bible studies. You had a bunch of different people that you were talking to. So talk to me about that and what the kind of highlights were in that experience.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I got to Wilmington, and that was one of the first things I wanted to make sure I found, find a good group of guys and find a good church to go to. And so I ended up trying 3 or 4 churches in the area, tried a couple of different college groups and whatnot, and I kind of settled down with going to FCA, going to our team Bible studies, and then just going to church on Sundays at a church I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed FCA. I tried a couple other ones. I felt like FCA was the one where there was definitely the most interaction between people, and it's not necessarily just one person speaking or in like this big audience. Like there's games, there's food, and like you're definitely interacting with other athletes and then other students as well. And then our team Bible studies were really cool. And something that was unique about Wilmington was we probably got about 15 people consistently to our Bible studies, which is definitely more than other programs for sure. And so we had 3 or 4 guys, myself included, who would lead the Bible studies each week, which is really, really cool. And just being able to grow in your faith with other people who are like-minded in Christ. But like I think that's one of those things too where it's so important, like making sure you find the right Bible study. Like if your team's having a Bible study, like that's so important to be with those guys because those are the people you're around 24/7 versus going to another youth group or another Bible study where you're just going there just because why not, and you might be skipping out on like your team Bible study where those are the guys you're around 24/7 and those are the people that you can make a difference on the most. So
definitely. And I would say too, to that point, I mean, it's such a trust component, right? Because when you're in a Bible study with people that you are constantly with on a daily basis, even if it's not your main core Bible study, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with having friends and having, a community outside of your team, but being with those people that are like-minded on your team is so important because it brings about a level of vulnerability, that people aren't necessarily, realizing. I mean, for me personally, I always struggled being really, really vulnerable. I would only talk about things that I was struggling with once I dealt with them, right? And so I remember being in my team Bible study at Florida. Like I remember the 1 week my junior year when I just broke down, and I remember all of my teammates looking at me like eyes wide, like, oh my gosh, like what is wrong? Just because they had looked at me for so long as just this person that doesn't break down, and being vulnerable with your teammates just helps build that team trust and that team connection so much better, I think, personally.
For sure. And I'd also say with your team stuff, if you're a college athlete and you are a believer, most likely you're going to be on a team where they're probably not living out their faith, but a lot of people on my team and in my particular grade class were interested in it. Mm-hmm. And it's if I just want to be around people who are Christians, even if they don't play baseball, because we agree and see eye to eye on all the same things, I'm kind of missing out on the impact I could have on those guys because they're interested. They're just not necessarily all the way there yet. And being interested is one of the best things because that's where you can start pouring out into people. And if you're okay, well, I don't want to be with this person because they're not all the way there right now, then I think you're being arrogant and prideful first off, but you're neglecting somebody who needs help and is close to being there but isn't quite all the way there, and just keep planting those seeds until they get to that point. There's plenty of guys that I know since high school that are now sophomores, juniors, seniors, and even older than that weren't there early on, but now they're getting there. And you can't force somebody to be there as a freshman or sophomore if they're not willing to be there. Like, if people are content doing their own life and living a worldly life, like, you can only plant seeds. Like, you cannot force somebody to change.
For sure.
How they're living.
Well, and I think it's important to remember that Jesus sat with sinners, and Jesus spent most of his time with sinners. He didn't sin with them, but he spent most of his time with sinners because he said that it was the sick that needed a doctor, not the healthy, right? And so I think also the other point that I wanted to make, you know, like, you saw a lot of growth on your team from just the year that you were there. I mean, there were guys that were accepting Christ. I mean, one of your roommates, and actually not, he wasn't one of your roommates. Will? He wasn't one of your roommates, but
I got a couple guys in my class, so, and Will's one of them, where definitely, and then my roommate last year, Jack, definitely have gotten more interested in Christ, and it's been awesome just to see their interest, like, but it's one of those things where it's like, you don't force them, you don't force it on them, you encourage them, and that's one thing where, like, you don't tell them what they're doing is wrong. Like, you just, like, don't think that because I'm a Christian and this is how we're supposed to live a righteous life away from sin, don't allow that to get in the way of hanging out with people who are good people. Don't get me wrong, great people. And, like, don't be like, well, I disagree with his stance on drinking, so I'm just not going to be around him because of that. Like, no, like, if they're good friends and they're good people, like, those are the people that you're going to be friends with forever, for, like, your entire life.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your summer. Can you stop that? That probably just picked up on the audio. Ding dong. Anyways.
Just cut it
out. Jason clearly doesn't know podcast etiquette, which is that you don't put your entire face in the microphone. Anyways, let's shift gears.
Because I had a traumatic experience last year with the microphone. We had our team dinner, our team banquet before the season, and, like, you had to get up in front of, like, 300 some odd people and say your name, where you're from, and your major. And I got up into that microphone and I shouted, "My name's Jason Mack from Fuquay, Virginia, North Carolina, and I'm an accounting major," as loud as I could. And everybody said, I mean, it was funny.
I don't think I ever heard that story. Yeah. That's funny. So this is trauma for him, you know, sitting with a microphone in his face is trauma.
I've gotten better at it since, just because, like, that was, like, my first time. Yeah. So now I'm like, now I know, like, the distance, how far, how close it should be.
He's a pro now, but he's still dealing with some.
Definitely not a pro, just not the first time.
Not a rookie. All right, let's talk about this past summer when you were playing with the Jacksonville Ospreys. Now, one of the things that we haven't necessarily touched on that I do want to touch on, you know, over the summer, because by the end of the summer, the last month that you were playing with the Ospreys, you were batting over 400. Yeah. That your bat was a point where you had, you know, overthought and just really had gotten in your head a lot for a really, really long time. What was the shift that went into this summer? Because by the end of the summer, like I said, you were playing very, very well. Like, what was the switch that you were able to flip to kind of turn over a new leaf with your bat?
So let me just say this first. So last year, freshman year ended. I ended up getting a red shirt after the season, which I'm super grateful for, that I still have that year of eligibility. Just honestly wasn't really a whole lot of opportunities open with kind of being the third string catcher, and then we had a fifth year at third base, and he was, like, our team captain. So just some really good players around me, and so I kind of knew that going into the season. And then I ended up going to playing summer ball in Jacksonville, North Carolina, which is the Old North State League. And honestly, it was the most fun I've ever had playing in my life. So I actually ended up playing with Will, who was one of my teammates at Wilmington this past year, and he loved it too. It was a great experience, like super fun. But yeah, definitely, like, my freshman year, like, hitting wise, like, kind of go in. They tell me to switch positions day one, so I'm going through the change of figuring out catching every single day. So, like, I'm not really working on my hitting as much, and then kind of spend all last fall and all spring really working on my catching, because if there's a chance I get in this game, I have to be ready defensively. And so as a result, like, offense didn't really work on it as much. I would say I struggled my freshman fall, and then got a little bit better in my spring scrimmages. But it was at the point where I was overthinking it. Like, I just couldn't really figure it out mentally, and just really frustrated with it, I would say. And then kind of this summer, I I don't know. I kind of got to the point where just have fun and just see what can happen and just stop beating myself up over every single bat. And a cool little thing that I learned was like every time, like in baseball, like a key phrase is flush it. But like for me, like every time I heard the word flush it, like there's a negative connotation around that. And so I changed how I say, like I just tell myself just to move on. Don't flush. I don't say don't flush it anymore. I just say move on, reset. I don't know. I just think that for me mentally is just a phrase where it helped me to it literally just helped me to move on from the past. Just forget it and just reset and focus on the next pitch. But no, I just think this summer it was just one of those things where it was like, it was a very low stress environment and there wasn't a whole lot of pressure at all, which there is at Division I baseball.
For sure.
And you just got to play. And you just got to play and have fun. And literally whatever happens. And yeah. And it was like a 2-month season. So the first month, like coming off a red shirt, didn't play. I would say I didn't play bad, but it was one of those things where my hits really weren't falling. I was just hitting them hard right at people. And then the second month, I couldn't get out, honestly.
Anyways, let's talk about your fall at Wilmington. So you ended up going back to school at Wilmington this fall, had a good fall. He was home virtually every other weekend to do his accounting homework, which I thought was really, really funny. He had my mom and dad who are accountants, sort of, kind of.
I think they're above accountants.
Dad thinks he's above being an accountant. Mom is like...
Mom's struggling with accountants.
Well, you struggled just as much. He's like, somebody needs to do my homework for me because I can't figure it out. And then mom's like, well, I can't figure it out either. Anyways, so we saw Jason a lot this fall. But at the end of the semester, you decided that you were not going to return to play baseball at Wilmington and that you were actually going to attend a JUCO in Florida just to get...
I actually say I kind of decided that middle of September. I kind of knew after a week of...
Well, my question was, what was your thought process and how did you get to that point? Go ahead.
Well, I would say I made up my mind probably first week of scrimmages in September. Just like I had a decent fall, played pretty well, hit over 300 this fall, played really good defense, and did everything I was asked to do, and didn't yield in the best opportunity for me. So I was like, you know what, I want to go play this spring, and with the way college baseball is at right now, I was like, I want to go play, just see what I can do, just go put up some numbers this spring and just see what can happen after that.
Definitely. And I do want to briefly touch on this for a second because this is such a constantly changing landscape in college athletics. And I've seen this a lot because I also work for Pro 5 where he went to high school. And so it's just so different with this, legalization of NIL, which has now led to all of these roster limits. And baseball has been super, super hugely impacted by this. And
I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
Just disclaimer.
But as a result of all this NIL stuff, the roster limits have now been, put up. And then you also have college coaches that are going out to JUCOs and they're going out to other universities and they're pulling in transfers. They're pulling in players that are better developed and not necessarily developing the high school players, and so this is one of the products of, Jason's decision. And I guess Jason's decision is one of the products of what's going on in college baseball. So my question for you is what you would say to somebody who is either one in your same shoes going through the same thing and also maybe a high school player who's trying to get committed and wants to go on to play college baseball.
I would say for both people, definitely the person in my position, it takes courage to make this decision. Like, you're willing to go outside your comfort zone. So I would definitely say, don't allow what your classmates or what people in your class are talking about. You have to make the best decision for you and for your baseball career, and that requires having man-on-man conversations with your coaches, being honest with them, but being confident when you have those conversations is the biggest thing. You're betting on yourself and just being confident and being content in who you are, for sure. And I would say for high school kids, don't necessarily look at these new JUCO rules as a bad thing, because most high school kids that go on to play college baseball do not end up playing pro ball. So the benefit of being able to have 2 years at a JUCO and then going on to play 4 years at a 4-year, could be a blessing in disguise. Obviously out of high school, it's a tough thing, and it would have been tough for me to swallow too, for sure. But as somebody who's going to a JUCO after having the year and a half at a Division I school, like, it's definitely a blessing to be going to a spot where I can compete and I am going to have a chance to play early. So
Definitely.
it's not necessarily what the coaches tell you in like when you go through the high school recruiting process where they're like, oh, you'll have a chance to play early. Like, you can be honest with these junior college coaches because that's what they want. They want transparency.
For sure.
And then, like, you can be honest with what you want and what they want out of you. And like, that way you can kind of feel like where's the best place to go.
Definitely. And I feel like the whole thing, it makes you really, really like grateful
For sure.
for the opportunities, just because I remember, out of high school, you were like, oh my gosh, like I have to go D1, I have to go D1, I have to go D1. And now you're like, maybe, out of high school, D1's not all that it's cracked up to be. I just want to play.
If you play, it's everything. If you don't play, like,
right,
it's not everything that that people make it out to be. But
for sure,
it was definitely a cool year though, because I redshirted after the season, and then I got to travel everywhere as the bullpen catcher, and so I got to go on all the experiences, all the trips. I had a blast not playing, and so like I had a great year just hanging out with my buddies, but definitely want to play.
For sure. And definitely to Jason's point, like, know yourself, and know what you want out of the experience. Because if you want to play, then you have to put yourself in a position where you're going to play. But if you're okay, maybe being that second string, third string guy who might sit on the bench most of the time, but you want to be a part of the team, you want to be a part of, the group. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I competed with, a wide variety of different people that wanted different things out of their college athletics experience. And, sometimes I didn't see eye to eye with people on, what we wanted out of it. And that's okay. Like, people are going to look at it very differently. And, you just have to know yourself and know like what you want out of the experience. But my last question for you is, just going through the whole retirement process now, almost being a year out of it, I definitely have a different perspective on the ending of my college athletics career. And so my question for you is, when you're looking back in 10 years, what will make you satisfied that you did everything that you possibly could and, had the career that you wanted?
I think first, like, using your resources around you, using what you have. That way, like, you can say I put physically everything I had into it, and it works out or it doesn't work out, like with accomplishments and whatnot. But you know what? Like, you can look at yourself in the mirror and be like, you know what? I poured everything into it and it just didn't work out, or did work out. But then I would say definitely spend the time with your teammates in the locker room, on the bus trips, in the dugouts, all that stuff, in the dorm rooms. Because that stuff makes or breaks it. And those are the guys, like, you'll know or you will completely never talk to them again after college. Like, some of them you'll talk to and some of them you'll be like, I can't wait to never see you again. Which there are some of those guys. But there are the guys where they will be coming to my wedding in a couple of years.
For sure.
Whenever that happens.
Yeah, whenever. Yeah.
Probably never at this point. But.
Well, it's funny you say that too, because Danielle and I
cut that part out.
Just for that, I will not be. Come on now. It's so funny though, because Danielle and I actually had that same conversation the other day, in our first, episode where we were kind of talking back and forth. And it was just the advice that we were giving to people who are still in the midst of it is just say yes to everything, like say yes to every single moment. Because I can look back now on moments when, I would be so stressed about practice and I'd be like, I need to go to bed, like I don't want to go hang out with my roommates and laugh and do silly things. And, like I get annoyed.
Saying yes to the wrong things. Like they
Correct.
They knew I had boundaries I wouldn't cross.
For sure.
I would not do certain things that they would do, and
exactly
they came to respect those boundaries. But hanging out in dorm rooms, hanging out in the apartments, just goofing off, like
that's what you'll remember about the experience. That's what
some
you'll
of the
hold.
other stuff you don't have to necessarily compromise if you don't
for
want to.
sure.
But also knowing when you should say yes versus when you should say no. Like, hey, is what they're doing a little bit off the rails, and I don't want anything to do with it.
Right. So. And I think to your earlier point of taking risks, I think taking risks is so huge. I mean, that was kind of my mindset when I transferred out of Florida and went to Tennessee for my grad year, was just, okay, I'm going to try to put myself in the best opportunity to, give myself, the best shot to finish out my college athletics career. And it didn't necessarily pan out. It wasn't the year that I wanted, but at the end of the day, like I walked away from my sport knowing that I put 110% and I took the risks and I made the uncomfortable decisions and had those uncomfortable conversations and stuff like that. And now today, as a 23-year-old, I can look back on it and say, you know what? I did everything that I possibly could and I have no regrets, you know? So I think that that's a really, really important.
I think when you say that too, like you have to truly be content with that. Like, because I think for so long, like you're like, oh, like your best effort's not enough. If you truly give your best effort, like you use all your resources, you work your butt off, like, and it doesn't work out, you have to be content with looking yourself in the mirror and saying, I'm moving all of my life. I'm focusing on the next chapter that God's given me and just moving on from the college life and onto my career. But then I'll also say, like, I kind of realized in October what I was doing. So I really try to spend the month of November at school and the last couple weeks in December, every kind of chance I had just to go upstairs, hang out with my friends and just enjoy the time I had with them. Because, like, I knew, like, even before I made it official, like, I knew that the time was kind of closing.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
And so I wanted to make the most of it in any way I could.
Definitely. All right. Well, that's all I've got for Jason. Thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. He's actually leaving for Florida in the next couple of days. So the next time that he will be on the show, it will either be remote or we will both be in the state of Florida. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you back here in a couple of days and have a happy new year.